Welcome to Simply Sarah. I am Sarah Stockham, your host. And every single time that we are together, the intent of our time before we come onto the show, when we are in the green room, we have this little thing that we do. And it's always about making sure that you, the audience, are well loved, that you're well cared for, that you are gifted energetic tools that you can immediately apply to your life. Today, we're having a conversation about podcasting. And this is something I recently finished a class with Jasmine Starr of Social Curator. And inside of that, there were conversations also about how do I start a podcast? What do I do? I am so fortunate to work with E360 TV, with Achieve TV, specifically with Julianne McCurris, who is the network president, and for her incredible insight for how to gift and help people who are wanting to start their own shows be able to do that. So we've been doing this for well over almost 2 years. In this point, we are in to season 4. Great things are happening as people are listening in America and Canada. They are listening also in Europe and UK, going into Crete, going into Australia and South Africa. Talked to somebody this last week who was in Morocco. Just so excited. And today, as we bring in Noemi Beres, I'm super excited because she's in Crete. And you have a whole thing on podcasting and helping people not only know that if it's time for them to start their podcast, but what to actually do. Noemi, welcome to Simply Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Sarah. And I would love to be on Crete, but I'm actually on Cyprus.
Oh, yes, you are on Cyprus. When I said that, I thought, oh, I think I'm on the wrong island. So let me get to Cyprus with you. And it's good to be here. Lovely. How did you grow up on Cyprus or did you move there?
No, I moved here 13 years ago with my family. I was born and raised in Hungary in Central Europe. So first we lived in Ireland for 7 years, and then we ended up in Cyprus, and 13 years and counting here in the Mediterranean world.
And why did you choose the Mediterranean? Of all the places that you could have moved, because you had already moved, and Hungary is one of the most beautiful places in Europe. And so for you to leave there and begin looking, why did you choose where you are?
That's an interesting answer. I have a very long answer to that question, but let's put it that way that, I have a master's degree in Scandinavian linguistics. I speak Danish and Swedish. And with those languages, I couldn't really find any job back then in the early 2000s. So we moved to Ireland first, but Ireland was just too cold and rainy. It's a beautiful place, but it's too cold and rainy. So my idea was to discover the Mediterranean world. And because I loved Greece, we wanted to move somewhere where it's close to, not too far from Greece. So we ended up in Cyprus. They speak English here, and the weather is amazing. And I can see the Mediterranean Sea from my home office. So yeah, I'm just very blessed to be living in a place like this.
This is so incredible. And one of my favorite places, I grew up in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and my parents worked on clean water projects and educational projects there. And we would, in the summertime, when we were coming back to America, because we lived at the edge of the rainforest, shoes were optional kind of a thing. My parents tried to keep us in what I would call flip-flops. If you're in Hawaii, they call them slippers. But they tried to keep something on our feet, right? On my feet. I'll be very specific about this. And yes, that's me in the picture in the center there in black and white. And as we were coming back to the States, we had friends of ours who lived on an island outside of Athens. And so we would go and fly into Athens, and then we would spend time in the Mediterranean. And all the places that I have been in Yugoslavia, in Greece, just being able to follow the Mediterranean and the deep blue color of the water. I haven't found that color anyplace else in the world. And so I think that you live in a very beautiful area.
I do indeed, yes.
So lovely. So how did you get into podcasting? It's something in America that people are really encouraging people to do. What was your road into this with your background in multiple languages?
That's also an interesting story because I had nothing to do with podcasts before 2020. So I became an entrepreneur in 2007, and we had an online travel-related business with my husband. I was doing social media marketing, online marketing, content creation, travel writing, blogging. So yeah, I always loved languages and traveling. So that was my space. But unfortunately, the pandemic hit, and the whole industry collapsed, the whole travel industry collapsed. And so we had to pivot. We had to find another way to make our living. And luckily, we had a mentor from Ireland who was into podcasting in the podcasting world way before many people in Europe. And he advised us to start something with it. So that's how we started our podcast booking agency in 2020. In April in 2010, we just celebrated our fourth birthday a couple of months ago. So yeah, that's how it all started. I had nothing to do with it, and it was a very interesting journey with a lot of sweat and tears. But yeah, we made it, and I just love every day of it, and I love working with people worldwide, especially my clients from the US, Canada, and UK.
Yes. So how do people access, if they decide that they want to move forward and work with you, how do they get a hold of you, Noemi?
They can always get in touch with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can always find me there. Just type my name in, Noemi Beres. You will find me. And also our website, which is podcastconnections.co.com. That's our website, and you can get in touch with us there too.
Absolutely. Excellent. And those things will also be in the show notes. So as we get into the meat of this, I would love for you to share some of the things that you think make a great podcast. What is some of the bones, some of the meat of what really needs to go into a podcast in order for it to be something that other people are going to be listening to and encouraging other people to listen to?
What I always tell, because I'm kind of on the other side of the whole story, because I represent the podcast guests. So we are the people who help them to find the right podcast to be a guest on. So a podcaster, obviously, they need to have a niche that is important, and they need to help people to tell their stories. I think that's one of the most important things for a podcast host. Also, to being authentic, being open, even as a host, because that will help the guest to be authentic and to be open as well. And also, the other thing is engaging. I came across many podcasts through my work in the past 4 years that some podcasts were, entertaining. Other podcasts weren't so much entertaining. So I guess to find the right balance between not to being stiff or not to being too formal, and there's something nice, something human, something conversational. I think that's so important when people listen to a podcast. And also when it comes to starting a podcast, finding the right time of the podcast, which I mean that doesn't have to be too long. It's like it can't really go over an hour. It's just too long. 15 minutes, that's too short to open a story and to really tell your story and share your life and share your knowledge on a podcast. So what I noticed, and all the other researches showed us as well, that about around 47, 50 minutes, that's like an ideal length of a podcast interview. So I guess these are all important bits and pieces that the podcast host have to be aware of when they start a podcast. And I think there are just a couple of things.
Beautiful. I love the made up word edutainment, where it's educational and entertaining, right? So that you have both of those pieces that are taking place during an episode. And so as you talk about what you guys do is actually find the right places for guests to come in, for the right podcast for them to be able to share their story, perhaps share more about their business as they're doing that as well. What are pieces that you look for as you are talking to your clients and they want to be booked, and as you are looking at the huge world out there of podcasting?
Yes, I mean, when we do the research for our clients, but if you don't have a podcast booking agent, you can also do your own research. Obviously, you have to find your niche. You have to figure out what your business is about and what you really want to talk about during an interview. And I always tell my clients, never ever wing it. Always be prepared and have your topics, talking points ready, because these are just they're very important to
Yes.
start a great conversation. And so that's the first thing. And I always ask my clients to come prepared. That belongs to the first part. So just being ready. That what we did before here with you, Sarah, I just really enjoyed that, like kind of this grounding exercise, a bit of meditation, just breathing a little bit before we getting into the interview. I think that's wonderful. And that also part being prepared, not for running from one interview to another and try to squeeze in 5 podcast interviews into 5 hours, because for me, it's just too much. I'm doing also podcast testing, as you can see, and I think it's, I think less is more. Like what I would advise, like you can, if you are starting out in the podcast guesting world, start with 2 podcasts monthly, so you get into the habit and you just get into the flow, how it is to be in a podcast interview. And also try to be engaging and not too stiff, not too formal. Treat this conversation as a normal, quote unquote, conversation between 2 people who are having maybe a coffee or a tea, or they're just sitting down and have a chat. I think that's so important. And and be punctual. That's also important when it comes to guesting, and be respectful with each other's time. Everybody is busy. Everybody has other stuff to do. So being respectful with the time, that's also an important perspective.
Oh, you are bringing up such important things from my perspective of being on the other side, right? Of somebody who invites people to be on to the television show that we also then move into a podcast. The whole idea of coming prepared is super helpful. I have somebody who I did a presentation on Saturday, and they said to me, we would love to have you come on our show. Would you please give us some questions to ask? And I thought, what an interesting thing that they are coming in with, I don't have questions for you. I just want you to be on the show. And so it gave me a chance to sit down and think about, what do I want to share? Okay, if I know what I want to share, then what is it that how do I want somebody to ask that question? Right. And so being able to come into that point was a very different place for me. And I was very, very grateful for that experience, because then right after that, somebody wrote me and said, I would love to have questions to be able to ask you when we get together. And I thought, I'm into the question asking point at this point, right? I know how to do this. I know how to ask the questions, because I know that what I'm not looking for are yes and no answers. I don't want people to ask me questions that are just yes and no. I want to be able to ask questions that open up for a conversation. And for me, the highest compliment I get is when somebody says to me, it just sounded like you were sitting with your friend having a conversation over a cup of coffee. And yes, I have my cup right here. And in that space, I just got to listen in and got to learn. And I learned some tools. I had a different way of looking at some of the tools that I already use to help make my life the best that it possibly can be at this point. So I really appreciate what you are sharing in this place. Noemi, we're going to take a quick break here to say thank you to our sponsors. We are so, so grateful for our sponsors. Amazing things are happening as a result of their support and encouragement. And we trust that these things are also empowering your life. I also want to say a huge thank you to Glass Arts Collective. When we are looking for gifts to be able to send people, this is one of the places that we go and look, because it is such a beautiful, creative place. And if you have never taken the opportunity as an adult to break glass, I just encourage you to find a place around you that does art kinds of work with glass, because it is truly a phenomenal, incredible experience to be able to do that. In this conversation that we're having with Noemi Beres, she's talking about how she gets people ready to be on other podcasts, other people's shows. And I love that you were talking about how during the shutdown, you discovered that your plan that you had, the things that you'd been working on, were things that didn't necessarily pan out the way that you were wanting to. The entire travel industry took a huge, huge hit during that space and time. What skills were you able to take from that industry and move them into what you are doing now as a businesswoman? What skills are ones that are able to, no matter what industry that you've been in so far, have been really important for you to continue to craft and to hone?
That's a brilliant question. I was always a creative type. I'm also an artist. I make collages, hand-sewn collages on canvas. So I think that's kind of creativity helped me to cope with anything that came to my way and to really figure out like what to do in a different space, in a completely different niche. And also, I think because I traveled a lot and I lived in different countries, I lived in Denmark. As I was a teenager, I was an exchange student. I lived a year there and then ended up in Ireland for 7 years, then 13 years in Cyprus. So all this multicultural environment and getting with touch with a different culture, with people from different culture, and just finding my space in a whole different new environment, it was always kind of easy for me. Thanks to my upbringing and thanks to my parents' support and the way they treated me like a teenager when I, went on this quest to be an exchange student in Denmark, age 16. So that really helped me to cope with anything that came my way. Also, my motto in life is just keep going. And I had a few personal issues and trauma happening in 2019. I lost my dad to cancer in May in 2019, and then my grandma to an accident in 2019. So there was a lot of grief, a lot of grieving, and art helped me to cope with all that grief and really helped me to focus on important things in life. And I think everything, all my experiences, my traumas, good and bad experiences, just helped me to be the entrepreneur who I am today, and helped me to cope with anything that came to my way. So yeah, I think these kind of the skills that helped me to form myself, and also being consistent and persistence in my entire life since I was a kid. And I was that type that was always studying and going to university. I always had my goals, and these goals I had when I started my own business as well, and just rinse and repeat everything. And no matter what, if you don't have any income at the beginning, it doesn't matter, it will work out. So, and it did. And so that was kind of my space all the time, and that's how I experienced life and business.
Noemi, you talked on some really important pieces. I think one is having this goal, this understanding of what you're being pulled towards. And for some people, it takes them into adulthood to finally be able to hear what it is that they are supposed to do, what they're good at. They've been so busy making other people happy or doing the things that came easily to them that maybe they aren't necessarily doing the things that develop who they are as a person. And I also appreciate you touched on the fact that you had parents who were incredibly supportive, who encouraged you at 16 to go to Denmark, right? To leave Hungary, to leave home, and to go in Europe to go learn another language, to go live someplace else, to have that experience, and their trust in you in that place. What a beautiful, beautiful gift that parents can give children. And then that space of art, allowing creativity to be something that helps you move through things that are difficult, things that are painful, but also it helps you express the good in life as well. I think the piece that for me that I hear as you talk about all the way through is that you could take your camera literally and turn it all the way around in your room and everything that we saw would be something that is you, that represents you, that's about you. So you're not trying to create something that's not you. You are creating something that is another facet, another expression of who you are. And I think that that's something that is so incredibly important for people, as they are looking for their niche, as they're looking for what their work happens to be. Not that you need to allow people into every part of your life. I'm not saying that at all. But for that congruency, the fact that butterflies have two wings, right? And they are the same on both sides. And that space of congruency, that we are able to be who we are on camera, off camera, in front of the microphone, off the microphone, that we are not creating a persona. Perhaps we are pushing deeper into a persona, but we're not necessarily creating somebody that we are just when the lights are on, or that the camera is rolling, or that the microphone is there. Do you think that that also then feeds into the longevity of somebody being able to be on different podcasts?
Absolutely. Being true to yourself, being original, being unique, and just really being who you are and not pretending, as you said. And we all have like different masks we wear during our life, but being authentic, I think they're just so important when you are a guest on a podcast, and people can align with you and your message so much easier and better when you do that, instead of pretending that you're someone else and that's not really you. And it actually is exactly the same situation when it comes to social media, because I was into the social media space for a very long time, for like 17 years, and it's still counting, because I love social media, I love content creation. And that's what I see on LinkedIn too, that like some people that didn't want to keep up this very professional facade that they had maybe in the, I would say, before 2020 or in the 2018, 14. And social media is not about that anymore. It's about originality. It's about uniqueness. It's about authenticity. It's everywhere. And the more authentic you are, the people will believe you more and more and trust you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. I think that's just so important right now.
I think also that it then magnifies the work that we are doing, and also magnify not just in terms of being able to see, that people can say, oh, I'm attracted to that, but also the magnetism that happens like with electricity or with magnets, right? That
Right.
You have magnets that are very, very weak, and then ones that are much stronger, that things in a wider area are attracted to them. And I think that as we move into authenticity, I know that I was listening to Roy Valden talk about people who are choosing to brand themselves, that CEOs never used to brand themselves. They were always about branding the company. And that people are now in high level C-suites are choosing, at least in America, are looking at, how do I brand myself? Maybe I'll have a whole much more, maybe I'll have many more jobs in my life. Maybe I'll do a whole lot of other things, but who am I, and how can I best brand that using hopefully one word, maybe three words? And I think inside of that space then also becomes this understanding if a person is a good match for a particular show or not, if they really know who they are, because then it's very, very easy to say, these are not the ones that are going to, I'm not going to find my audience there. I'm not going to find the people that are listening to my message there. But if I continue, maybe they're not as many places, but if I come into those places and I'm fully magnetized with my message, the messaging will be stronger. And therefore, the people who are listening are much more apt to like or subscribe or to follow or whatever it is that you're looking for inside that space.
Yes, so very true. I agree 100%. I love it.
So what advice would you give? You've talked a little bit about find your niche, know what your message is, be on time. And that's such an important piece, particularly if somebody is going to be going live. Not all shows are going to choose to go live just because of the time zone differences, and then also the host and the producer's scheduling, and also their attitude or desire for things to be live. Because when things are live, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So So sometimes people will choose to pre-record. I'm not necessarily saying that that's what people need to do. I'm just saying that that's one of the things that's out there. In that space of people being on time and them having their niche and having their message and being clear and coming prepared, what are some of the other advice that you give to people as they are preparing? You have created the connection. They're going to be on a show, but what advice would you give to them in terms of how they show up?
I think the most important advice is to listen to a few episodes before you get into the show, because that's just so important. First, you will get to know what the podcast is about, what the show is about. I mean, first thing. Second, you will learn the host style and the vibe they have. I think that's really, really important to align with them during the conversation. So these are the top most important things when it comes to that. And it's part of being prepared, obviously, because you have to listen to a few episodes. And also, if you can, just a word of advice, please leave a review in Apple Podcasts or any kind of platform that you usually listen podcasts, because just a huge push for the podcast host, and they really appreciate it. And even the tone of the conversation is better if you tell them that, like, see, I just love your show. I listened to 2 episodes and I left you like a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And yeah, yes. I think who doesn't like that?
Oh, it is so true.
Yeah. Absolutely.
On the other side, I know that I mentioned her earlier, Julianne McCurris, who is our network president. I know that when she is wanting to invite somebody to be on her show, she tells all of the hosts this. She talks about it in front of, we were recently in Los Angeles for a host convention for all of us to get together. And she was talking about how she will decide who it is that she would like to have as a guest on her show. And maybe it's somebody who has been on one of Oprah's book shows. Maybe it's somebody who has worked with the movie The Secret, whatever it happens to be. Has picked out that person or the people, and then she begins to follow them, doing exactly what you are saying. Follow them online, and she begins to look at their posts, look at what they are sharing, and then begins to really think and create thoughtful reviews for them, or thoughtful ideas as she's putting things in, whether it happens to be on social media or it happens to be in the YouTube world, or watching some that they have created, have done, right? And so she is being very, very careful in her languaging and how she's showing up. And she has said it has been the most impactful way for her to be able to invite later on. Then she doesn't just do it once or twice and then, hey, come be on the show. She does over a period of time, right? So she's playing the long game. And I'm hearing you say the same thing. You know, as somebody who wants to be on podcasts, know that you're in this not just for a hot second, but that you are here because you have something to share that's of worth, of value, and that you are willing to play the long game of doing exactly what you said. Listen into several episodes, write things down, give feedback that's positive, that's encouraging. And then, yes, tell the hosts that you have done that so that they can put the two together, that the person who said that, this is who you are in person or on screen. So incredibly, very, very powerful. I love the advice that you are giving. Is there other advice that you would share?
Yeah, absolutely. Once you had your interview, and maybe next day you just send a thank you note to the host. I think that's just really powerful, because we don't say thank you enough to each other anymore. I think even if it's just an email or even if it's a LinkedIn message, it still counts. And you can just, tell them in 2 sentences why you love the show and why you felt good, or just any kind of impression or feedback. And people love that, and hosts love that. And also, I try to tell this on every podcast interviews I go, please promote the episode. Not just once, not just one share on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, but do it regularly. You can go back to this interview, because by these podcast interviews, you're creating a lot of content, a lot of evergreen content that you can use again and again in the future. Yes. I'm using interviews from 2 years ago, and they still evergreen. And I give a shout out to the host. I tag them, also important. Always tag them. Always. So I love it.
Always.
Always, please, please. That's just so important. And promoting an episode is just a win-win situation for both parties. And because you're having an interview is, as you said, it's not just this, 30 minutes or 50 minutes. This is the beginning of maybe a great relationship or
Exactly.
business. Maybe you can do business together, be in each other's master classes or private Facebook groups. So this is just the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love how you talk about this as just the beginning, because it's not the final story. It's not the end of, it is just the beginning. And when you talk about after the show to say a thank you, but then also as soon as the show, if it's not live immediately, when it goes live, to do all of the social media. If you have a newsletter, put it in there. If you've gotten the link to it, to go ahead. Sometimes publishing areas won't allow you to pre-publish. They need to wait until it actually goes live on whatever the platform happens to be, and then you can have access to it. So then ask for it afterwards, right? Be intentional in how you are choosing to get the information. And then a simple question to ask is, can I take this and have my own production crew do different things to it? Can they cut it up into little bites? Can they do other things, right? Just having that conversation about that, knowing that you are part of the content. And so what can you do with this? And how can you use the content that's happened now, not just name dropping the podcast that you're on, but how can you use that to share with the people who are in your world? If you have a mail list of 5 people, you have a mailing list of 5 people. That's 5 people that probably the show the host didn't have access to, right? That may not have known. If you have lists of hundreds, again, or thousands or hundreds of thousands, again, it's that exact same concept of let the people on your mailing list, let the people in your world know what you have done, that you've had this incredible opportunity, that you've had the opportunity to go forward and do these things. And as we're having this conversation, it's reminding me of a conversation that I had. I was interviewed about a year ago, and I need to go back to that and promote that again, because it was on a massive platform out of the Los Angeles Tribune. And I need to go back and pull that up again and share that again, because it was just an incredible opportunity there. So thank you, Noemi, for reminding me that I need to be going back and doing exactly what you are talking about, what you are saying, because there's so much depth inside of that as well. I love this idea, again, of saying thank you and then promoting. Are there other ideas, other advice that you give to people about what they do once they do have it and it's in their hands? What should they do with what they have?
Absolutely. What you just mentioned, like creating extra content out of it, creating audiograms, videograms, quotes, any kind of like JPEG photos with quotes on it from the interview. So yeah, it's just being creative. I think they're just really important when it comes to podcast guesting. We want to include this, actually we're working on to include this in our service as well, to provide this to people. So yeah, podcast guesting is not just about that one single interview, but creating more and more content by audiograms, videograms, even what you mentioned, loved it. Email marketing, part of the email marketing, send it out to your followers. Also, if you are, for example, member of different networking groups, and those networking group have a LinkedIn group or they have a Facebook group, share your interview. Why not? I mean, it's not bragging. It's just helping other people to understand you better, or they can be on that show, they can reach out to that show, and they can be guests as well. So you never know what kind of opportunities may arise. I think that's important. And yeah, content is still king, and it will be king for a very long time.
Yes.
And you have so much content in your hands when you are a guest in an interview. Just ask the host permission, and I would say 99% of the time they will let you use the content after it's aired.
Yes.
And it's just a great opportunity to advertise yourself and your business, building your brand, building your authority.
Yes. And even if in the future you choose to change what your business is or brand, just like you out of necessity did that, right? You still were able to take who you are and move it into this new area. So even if people don't necessarily, even if they change industries, they can still continue to share out the information that they did before. I say this thinking about how I used to offer a class called Choosing Life Again. It was about what do we do after we have had losses? And all of us are losing every day, right? You have a cup of coffee, you drink the coffee is gone. We go through these just these losses all the time. And then we have the bigger losses where we choose to relocate. Yes, there are great things that are happening out of that, but we are also losing being able to be face-to-face with people. And then we have the really big losses, at least I would call these the really big losses, like when my father transitioned, and working through that. And how do we go through these losses in such a way that we can still, on the other side, be honoring the people who have gone before us? And so I no longer offer that class. It's not one that's out there for people to say, ooh, I want to take that class from Sarah. And yet, having that information, putting it out in different places, allows people to know that I have done this work in the past. I'm still the same person. I'm still evolving and growing, but this is an area that I have spent time in order to heal myself, but also in order for me to be able to speak easily or more easily about the losses that I have had in my life. So even though I have changed, even though I'm the class that I have created for right now, the thing that I'm working on right now that's so powerful and exciting, even though that's what I'm working on, it's called From Stressed to Best, I still have this catalog of things that I have done prior to this. And so again, continue to keep these things, continue to share them out, continue to keep them available. If you are blogging, if you are sharing out to your newsletters, you have a newsletter that you are sharing out to people, to be using older content inside of there, because it gives a depth for people who are new to your list, new to your world, new to who you are, new to what you're working on. It's just so good. So my next question for you, Noemi, you've given so much advice. I just want to make sure before we change topics, is there any other advice that you would like to share before we move topics?
One more thing I would love to add is it's also an important advice when it comes to podcast guesting. Don't treat the interview as a promotion. So never, because it's not an advertisement for your product, for your service, for your book. And yes, the host will give you space and time to you promote your product, but don't use the podcast interview as a promotional tool, because it's not. It's a place and a space to share knowledge and share your story. I think that's really it's important to know. And don't just quote things from your book, but because people won't know who you are. So they won't be really interested in your service or in your book. They want to know you first, then your service, or then your book, or everything else.
People are coming in to listen to find out who you are.
Yeah.
And if they like who you are, they like your voice, they like how you talk about things, they like you as a person, they're so much more likely to go and follow you or find out more about you. If they discover that this is not the right fit for them, be grateful, because you don't want what James Wedmore calls as unhappy money. You don't want people buying your products or your books who are not pleased with you and who are going to be asking for that money back. It becomes just a lot of work. You want people attracted to you who are interested in what you have to say and who you are as a person. So amazing. In the space of advice and thoughts, I'd love to turn the conversation a little bit more towards raising children to be multilingual, to be multicultural, to be able to move in and out of different kinds of conversations. And as you're kind of thinking about that, I'll just set this up a little bit differently. Growing up in Africa, I discovered that there was a huge difference between people who are translating and people who are doing verbatim translation versus those who are looking at the full picture and who are doing much more of a inclusive idea of, it's not just word for word, but this is really the idea of the tribe, or the idea, the concept that's being shared, that's coming forward. And so as you are giving your children the opportunity to travel, to live in Cyprus, to go different places, knowing that you speak multiple languages, how are you helping your children to be able to expand in who they are and to be able to see the world through different eyes?
I think I love this question. I love this part because that's always fascinated me, even during my university years being bilingual. And my dream was to raise a bilingual child. And it came true. Probably I manifested it long time ago. And it happened because my son, I have only one son, he's 12. And he goes to a private school and a local British school here in Cyprus. And it's an amazing space for him to get to know other cultures, other nationalities, and languages, of course. I mean, he already speaks English. He's bilingual, so his mother tongue is Hungarian, but I think his English is as good as Hungarian, and also Greek. And I teach him, or Duolingo and I teach him, we teach him Spanish as well. So I think that's important. Spanish is an important language in the world right now. Yes. And plus his classmates, there are, I think right now, like 18, 19 kids in the class, and there are 16 different nationalities in one class. Yes. So that's how you experience adversity and acceptance. And you have Ukrainians, you have Russians, you have Israeli kids. It's just amazing that kids can really understand each other. They're not against each other. And it's just beautiful to see that they can be in peace with each other while the rest of the world is not. Yeah. And and I would love him to be an exchange student. Like I was an exchange student before, because that really helped me to form me to be the person as who I am today. And just learning different languages is so amazing and opens up your brain, like the left or the right ones, and it really like intertwines. So it's amazing to speak different languages and to think in different languages for him as well. And because I've been living in English-speaking countries for the past 20 years, which is a very long time. So I often quote myself like thinking in English as well. A lot of times I'd like watch only English movies or American movies or TV shows or documentaries, or I read more in English than in Hungarian in my mother tongue, which is very strange. But it's a fascinating word. So that's why I became a linguist. and I love that topic anyway. And that's how you prepare your child. And and if you have the opportunity to send them to maybe just for a few months to abroad, especially if you live in the US, because we are just like such a different culture compared to Europe. And just to get to Europe for a few months, maybe to the UK or France or Italy or whenever in the world, I think that's just a huge opportunity to open up the world and see things differently, and not just so closed off or closed down in their own little world where they live. I think that helps enormously when you're raising a child.
And is your son looking already at potential countries to do foreign exchange in, or is he just so enjoying the group that he's with right now that he's not necessarily looking ahead, several years?
Not yet. No, I mean, he's not at that stage yet. He's only 12, so he wants to be a YouTuber. So I mean, that's
why not
his phase. But because Cyprus is a very touristic country, tourist island. So we get all the people all around the world coming to us. So it's already very multicultural. So sometimes you don't even have to travel to get that kind of vibe. Plus, we also visit Hungary many times a year, like 4, 5, 6 times a year. So for us, it's just coming back and forth between two cultures, just normal for him since he was 6 months old. So that helps too.
That's so good. So do you choose, is your preference to take a boat, a ferry, or your preference to fly to the mainland?
Oh, I wouldn't take a ferry from here. No, that would be horrible. No, it's always flights. I mean, we live like 20 minutes from the airport.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So I think they started a ferry from Cyprus to Greece, but you have to travel for days.
Yes.
And no, I know I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. So as you look at the different places that you have lived, I've always been very interested, not just in how the money looks different and how the stamps look different and how the way that you get onto the bus, because most of Europe is really well organized in terms of public transportation, but the food. And so, my experience with England was that the food was, a lot of it was fried, and there wasn't a lot of the same idea for me as freshness as what we were experiencing in Congo. So in Congo, we would have, fresh fruit every day, and we could get fresh vegetables very, very easily. Rice was the staple there, and not so in Europe. Much more on a different, when we were in France, the bread was phenomenal. In Belgium, the bread, just incredible, right? Couldn't wait to have breakfast, just because if it was only bread and butter, it was the best bread and the most amazing butter possible. It was enough, right? And so when you look at Cyprus and the food and being a multicultural place, what do you see? Is it much more of the Mediterranean kind of food, a huge influence on much more of the fish and that kind of thing? Or do you see other influences that are happening there as well?
There are a lot of influences here because there are a lot of British people lived here before the Brexit. So there was a huge British influence in the cuisine. But luckily, Cyprus really stuck to the Mediterranean diet. It's not as healthy as like 20 years ago, but it's still in a very good place, like fresh vegetables, fresh fruit all year long, which was amazing because we moved here and we were raising our child here. So you always had the fruit, fresh veggies, beautiful watermelon, strawberries in January, fresh, not like took some pears from different parts of the world. So yeah, it's still very fresh. They are meat eaters here in Cyprus, so that's the staple food, but also goat and lamb. And I love feta cheese, but that's actually more Greek than Cypriot. So, but I still love it. It's really nice. So yeah, and beautiful vegetables and fish as well. It's beautiful, or when you go to restaurants or when you make it at home. But that was the same situation for me in Hungary, because I was growing up in the countryside, and my parents had a small farm. So we always had fresh cherries, fresh strawberries, fresh carrots, fresh potatoes. And we were working, in the garden, in the farm. I helped my parents while I was growing up. So for me, going into the garden and just pick a strawberry or cherries or apple or pear or anything, it was just so natural and everything was fresh. So when we moved to Ireland, that was a huge shock to my system. It's like, oh my gosh, this tomato, it looks horrible, and how can people eat that? And no offense, Ireland, but yeah, the fruit and vegetables are not the best there. And yeah, a lot of fried foods, as you mentioned. It's very similar to the British cuisine, although you can still get nice fish in Ireland, a lot of potatoes, but it's so different. So when we moved to Cyprus, I just enjoyed that kind of culinary journey so much.
So good.
And I love cooking, and so I kind of use all my multicultural backgrounds when I make food. Like something comes from Ireland, something from Cyprus, something from Hungary. So it's kind of a very colorful cuisine that we have here at home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I recall from friends of ours, he was from Nebraska and my mom is from Nebraska. They didn't know each other growing up, but similar age. And he had come to Congo as a missionary to work on, he was an agriculturalist. And so how do you take the soil there and help people to have food that has more density in the nutrients? And his name was Carol French, and he had married Tove, who was Danish. And they had children, and I grew up with their children. And one of their Christmas ideas or Christmas traditions was that Aunt Tove, and we called everybody Aunt and Uncle just because we were there together, and it was much easier to do that than to call them Mr. or Mrs. It was just part of our tradition. And so Aunt Tove would make a cake at Christmas time, and there'd be one almond that would be whole. All the other almonds would be, not. And it was always exciting to find out who would get the whole almond, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we did that. I love that. I remember Risalamang or something like, that's what I recall. And it was, everybody loved it. Yeah, the almond. Yeah, that was a nice tradition I remember during Christmas time. Yeah.
Yes, such a lovely one. Wow. Are there things that you would like to reiterate for people who are wanting to be on podcasts, who are wanting to get to know the world in a different way, wanting to have the world get to know them in a different way? Things that you would like to reiterate for them to just really consider as they reach out to you or to other people to be on podcasts or shows?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, crafting a compelling pitch, obviously, that's really important. When you do that, the reach out part, it has to be unique. It has to stand out, because nowadays podcast hosts get so many podcast guesting pitches, unbelievable amount of them. So it's just better to do your research and keep it short and sweet and interesting. And I think that's really important. Include your bio, your topics, your talking points, and also obviously your website, your most important social links. You don't have to use everything that you have 2 followers. Like, try to concentrate on those that are, close to you. And also maybe include an interview that you were a guest on. Many hosts will ask you for that. And especially if you have just like a short clip, maybe that's even, better, because people don't have time to watch your whole 45-minute, interview. So try to focus on shorter clips. You can even, prepare that for yourself and include that in your pitch. I think that's really important when you do your pitches and you want to reach out to people, because that's the first point of contact when you reach out to a host, and that will decide whether they will continue the conversation with you or won't. So if you have that kind of fact on them, that's like, oh my gosh, I love this person, it's very interesting. And also include that you listen to this or that interview before you wrote that pitch, and include that. And maybe just a small remark, just a sentence that I left you a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. That will make magic when it comes to that, to pick you instead of the other 200 people. Maybe you want to be a guest on the same show.
Oh, it's so true. And I think the other piece is, know that they're going to ask you for your bio. They're going to ask you for photos of you. They're going to ask you for your links. And so I love it when I ask for that and somebody is able to have their VA or themselves send in. A number of times I've gotten links for Google Documents where everything is just already there. It's pre-prepared. It's ready to go. Just know that they're going to be asking for these things. And to be able to turn that around quickly can be very, very helpful in helping the production staff to move things along, because the person from my side, the people who are creating the advertising, as soon as they have that, they begin to work on putting the pieces together, because that's something that can be done immediately. So as soon as they get the information, they can begin that process. Wow, Noemi, this has been such a powerful conversation. I have loved this. And the time difference, I'm loving that you are, 9 hours ahead?
It's 6 p.m. It's 6 p.m. right now. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yes, it's so lovely that we're able to have this conversation. I'm so grateful for technology and grateful for Jeff for introducing us. Such a lovely, lovely thing. And so look forward to future conversations with you. And as you have things that you are working on, feel free to reach out as well.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Sarah. It was an absolute pleasure. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Beautiful. Well, friends, we're just so grateful for this opportunity to be able to be with you, to share with you content, ideas, things that will help you as you are looking at either from the point of view of somebody who has their own show, or if you are somebody who is the vast majority looking for opportunities to be on shows. I love this conversation with Noemi. The gifts that she gave, the advice is solid. I'm so grateful for that, and so grateful for you. And know that the next time that we are together, that we will also once again have incredible content just for you, sharing energetic gifts to help your leadership move forward better, to help you feel better about your entrepreneur work, to make you feel better about who you are and the gift that you are. The world needs you right now, and the work that you are doing is important. Until next time.